Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Sylvia Plain. I'm the Lifelong Learning Coordinator at the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians. This is our second of our Indigenous language speaker series. Last week we had Jordan Brandt, who gave a really amazing presentation about his work in Tyendinaga. And this week we have Velma Noah. Velma comes to us from Moraviantown, the Delaware Nation, located in southwestern Ontario. And I've known Velma for a little while now, so I'm really excited to have her present and to talk about her work. So a little bit about Velma. Like I said, she's a member of the Delaware Nation Territory. She spent a number of years learning language from the last fluent speaker of the Lenape Nation, or maybe in particular her community. She's graduated from the Native Language Instructor Program at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay. And following that, she attended Queen's University, where she completed the Native Teachers Instructors Program. After she attended the University of Western for linguistics and Indigenous studies, and she's taught a language within the Delaware Nation for over 13 years, and also at elementary, secondary, and post-secondary levels. Within the last 2 years, she's also began learning Anishinaabemowin and began her language teaching journey at Walpole Island First Nation, where she was placed in the Ojibwe Immersion language program for 4 months. Velma is a strong advocate for language revitalization and has learned most of, if not all of it, through oral transmission. So Velma's presentation today is called Spirit Connection, and we're very excited to hear what Velma has to say. So welcome, Velma, and thanks for sharing your time with us.
Yeah. Anishik, Kolomosi, ni dishinzi meduana kadokwe, ni halana pakwa, non jai lenape aking, platelongo mau. Anishik, for the invite. I just wanted to share a little bit about how I learned language. It all started growing up. Being a young mom, I was starting to have children, and every once in a while I would think about my own language, and kind of like a regret type feeling, like, geez, I wish I knew my language more so that I could teach my kids. So I started to think about those things, and I must have been in my 20s. And I do remember a little bit from kindergarten, like, I could count to 10. I knew how to say dog, pig, cat, cow, those like just real basic words, no sentences, nothing else, but just a few words. And so I started to really want that for my own children, was to know their own language. And it would come and go. And, when I was on my third child, I would think about it again. Then on my fourth, I had 4 kids. So every now and then I would think about something that I could give my own child, that nobody else could give them. And to me, that was their own language and who they were. So it would come and go, like I said. And then, I worked at high schools and did, various jobs and stuff. And then I decided one day to go, you know what, I'm going to go back to school, because I felt like I needed to do something else. So I went back to, took a college program called Aboriginal Healing. No, what is it? Traditional Aboriginal Healing Methods. And I took that at AEI, that was affiliated with St. Clair College. So I took that program, and in that program, it was all Indigenous based. So all of our teachers were Indigenous teachers, and that's the place where I learned history, things that I didn't know, things that I wasn't taught in elementary school, and because I didn't know who I was as a Lenape person. So in that course, I started to find out about my own identity, and in that process, I started to really think about language again. And this time, it wouldn't go away. Like every time, every day, I'd wake up first thing in the morning, I think about language. I'd go to sleep at night and I think about language. And I did this, for about 3 days, and I got really emotional. I actually cried and grieved for my language because I didn't have it. And so when we had our in our second year of college, we had an assignment, and one of those assignments was to go back to your community and learn a song in your language and come back and teach it to the class. So that's what I did. I was like, oh, I was so excited. So I went back to my community, and our language department was just this one office in the very back of the band office. So I went there, knocked on the door, and the lady answered, and she was um, worked in there by herself. And so I asked her, I have this assignment. I'm in school. Can you help me? I need to teach my class a song. And she said, we don't have any songs. And so I was shocked and I was sad. She wrote out a little verse and came up with a tune and recorded it on a tape and gave it to me. But that really bothered me, that I couldn't even go to our own language department and get a song. And so that really, like, I just felt like something has to happen, something has to change. And so that's when my language journey started. I I promised myself that I would do whatever I could to learn my language, and that's what I did. So I everybody was moving into the social work field, and you had to go on a placement for 4 months. Um, and I was originally moving into the social work field too, but then when language came within me, I guess, was woken up, and it wouldn't go away, wouldn't go back to sleep. So I thought, okay, well, I could do my placement in the language department at home in my community. So I was excited about that, and I went and asked and did all whatever I was supposed to do, and so I was able to do that for 4 months. So the elder that was in there, she had grown up with the language. That was her first language. So being there for 4 months, she spoke to me from 9 o'clock till about 3:30 every day for 4 months. And she just kept talking and talking, and then when I go home at night, she'd say, here, you take this tape and I want you to listen to that. So I did that all day at night before I went to bed for 4 months. And she would, the next day I'd go in and she would ask me questions and stuff. And it was really hard. It was really hard because I never heard these words before. I never was able to pronounce them. I didn't understand them. So it was like, there was days when I was so emotional that I would cry, and I would leave there at 4:30, go home, and I would cry and think, I can't do this. It's too hard. And then I would, sit and think and say, but I really want to, but I really, really want to in my heart to know my own language. So I would get up in the morning and I would go back. And so this happened a few times. I would cry. I would feel, I guess it was, I guess I kind of felt shame because I'm supposed to be a Lenape person, but I didn't know how to speak my own language. So I didn't want to carry that feeling anymore. I didn't want to feel ashamed to be who I was. So I worked hard, and every day I would listen, do what she would tell me to do. And then probably about the 3rd month mark, it's like she drilled it, drilled it, drilled it. Then all of a sudden it just clicked, and everything, I could understand it. And it was just like a switch. It was amazing. It was a switch. And I thought, oh my God, I know what she said. I know what this means. She would speak to me and I was like, I know what she's saying. Um, so it was really exciting, and I didn't think that I was ever going to get there. But it took me about 3 or 4 months to actually, I guess, open yourself up. It's like this own block that we put there for ourselves, not even knowing that we do it, because we can live our lives without language, and learn English and carry on in the world and work and all those things. But it's deeper than that. It's not on the surface. It's your spirit. So when I learned those things, I was so excited. I went told my dad, and like, oh my gosh, like, how many other speakers are there, in the community? Because I always thought there was only one, and that was the lady that I was working with. He said, oh no, he started naming all these names, and I count on my fingers, there's about 9 people. And I was like, wow. So this is what I did. I started to, one by one, go and visit these people, and I would knock on their door. I found out one was my grandma, one was my aunt. Didn't know that these people knew the language. So made my way around the reserve, started to slowly establish relationships with these elders. Um, and each and every one of them said, nope, I don't know the language. I don't remember. And so I was like, that's okay. I said, so I'd sit down and have tea with them. And I would slowly start with things like, hey, I learned this new word and I'm going to say it to you. And you want to see if you can understand it. And they were like, okay. So I would say small things, small little phrases like, I have to go to the bathroom. I'd say that in the language. And you should have seen their faces. Their faces just lit up like they knew what I was saying. And they said, they would sometimes say, can you repeat it? So I would say it again. And they're like, yeah, I remember that. And then they would start to say something back to me. So that's how it started. Little by little, the more I shared, the more they remembered. I would come over with books and stuff and say, hey, I found this book. And so I had to build that relationship with them so that they knew that it was safe to speak language and that I really wanted to know it. So I got the opportunity to do that. I got to spend probably the last few years with my grandma Stella. She went to residential school as well. So I slowly started to, I guess, remind her about the language. And she told me one time, she said, remember sitting at her kitchen table, and she said, you know what? She was so excited. She said, you know what? Before I die, I'm going to speak my language again. And she did. She um, she had homemakers going over there to help her, and her homemakers would call and say, you know what, Velma, you need to come over and see your grandma because I don't know what she's saying. She's only speaking in the language, and I don't know what to tell her. So, and every time I talk about language, like I get I'm emotional um because it's your spirit, it's your heart. And you can't look at language like it's just a bunch of words that you have to memorize. It's different. It's healing. It comes from directly from the creator, and you were given that at birth. You were given that gift of language. So I've learned that's the best way to learn is by oral or listening. I've established really good relationships with all of the elders, and one by one they all passed away. But I built a really good relationship with them, so much that um, I usually would have a dream about them when it was time for them to go home. So uh, I made my way over there to see them, talk to them, spend a little bit of time with them, and it was almost like they waited for me to see me, and then they would make their way home. So I've heard stories. I've heard stories from them about things um, that aren't written down, that they went through when they were young, ceremonies and stuff that was taboo to talk about. They never talked about those things out loud to anybody, but I had the opportunity to hear those stories. And then once I established those relationships with them, I started to gather all of them together. Whoever was willing to go have lunch, on me, I'll buy lunch just to have them with each other. So we would have lunches together, and I got to sit there and they would talk back and forth. So they started to remind each other, and they were like, they were laughing and having a good old time listening to each other, and I had the opportunity here, and it was amazing. And I'm really thankful that I've had that ability to be around them, just for, even if it was for later in their life, but I really appreciated it, and they knew that. So when I started to learn again, my grandmother, my dad's mom, was a fluent speaker, and my dad would take us over there every Sunday. We'd always go to my grandma's for supper. And I remember, I started to remember this as an adult. As soon as I started to learn language, I started to remember different things. But I remember when we went over there, she would always have this tape playing in her living room, and it was always in the language. And we'd come walking in, and she'd hug us and everything, and she would say, shh, shh, wait. She'd make us sit and wait until whatever she was listening to was done. So we sat on the couch, and you could hear somebody on that tape speaking in the language. And I remembered that later on in life when I was in my 30s. I started to remember those kind of things. So my grandma um, probably missed hearing that language. So she did what she needed to do to hear it, which whether it was to play her tape, then that's what she had to do for herself. Because it's really nice to hear language. It's a beautiful sound, and it doesn't matter what language, but it's so beautiful that that's the connection with it. It's because it's in you already. So, and then I remember another time, my mom's dad, my grandfather, lived next door to us, and he used to babysit us after he got home from work for a couple hours. So I remember playing in his backyard. Um, and I also actually I lived in his house after a while, but I live in the same area that he lived. And I remember him calling me, and I don't know where my sister was, but he called us in and he sat me down at the table. And what he did was he opened his fridge and he placed all these items on his table. And I remember sitting there and he pointed at every single one of them and said them in the language. And then when he got done, he said also in the language, "Do you understand me?" And I was about 4, but it was like, I remember what it sounded like and I remember what it felt like. And when he asked me, "Do you understand me?" I said yes. And he smiled at me. And I remembered that when I was probably about 34, 35 years old. I was like, and I remember every single word he used. I remember how he asked me, "Do you understand me?" So that was like my grandpa. My grandfather actually helped keep that switch up, open, helped to keep me open. And so did my grandmother. So those little things that they did, they actually really helped me. So I'm really thankful for that. Um, Also, I've taught in the community for many years, and I've taught uh, babies 18 months old to right up to worked with elders. So I've worked with many age groups. And when I started to become a grandmother, um, I made sure that the first language that my grandchildren heard was their own. So my first grandson was born. He's 9 now. But I made sure that I was at the hospital, and I made sure that the nurses knew when he comes out or when she comes out, um, you're going to give her to me, him or her to me, because I need to say something to them. So they were okay, they didn't know what to think, but it's like, I need something to do something. And they're like, okay. So each child after that was born, that's what I did. And because I want them to have that connection um, with their own language. And it's something that I never had. Not, my mom went to residential school. So, and my dad never, but being raised by a fluent speaker, I'm pretty sure he knew the language. To what extent, I'm not sure. He never taught us, but I did one time walk in the house and actually catch him saying some words to, I think my sister's baby, she, saying something to her in the language. So I was like, what the heck, like, realizing that maybe he does know too, but he didn't want us to be treated in a way that they were long ago either. So he thought, I'm going to protect my children so that they're not going to be punished for using their language. So that's what he did. And even though how little it was, I'm thankful for that as well, because I remember a lot. It's like a blood memory. That's what it is. Blood memory. It's in you, your ancestors from the beginning of time. So it's a reconnect. So my grandmother, my grandfather were fluent speakers. My mom and my dad weren't, but I'm the next generation. So I picked up where we left off. So it's like, even though that line was severed, it's reconnected because I went out and learned my language. So and I do what I can for my grandkids. I don't see them every day, but they understand quite a bit of language. My own children understand quite a bit of language. And I, even though I don't work in the community, I still get messages from people, "Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that?" And I gladly do, because I want people to know their language, and I want them to be connected with who they are, because identity is about is about you, is about who am I as a Lenape person or Anishinaabe or Cree or Haudenosaunee, Hongwe, whatever. What does that mean for you? And to me, when I ask my own self that, it's like to be able to speak my own language, to know who I am. So I know my spirit name. I go to ceremonies. So I've learned a lot, and I've a lot of knowledge about those things, but I'm still learning. So I don't know everything. So I'm really thankful that I've been able to do that. So there's spirit connection there with it, because the creator gave you language. You are connected that way. So then you communicate that way. I pray with tobacco, and I know my prayers are heard. Sometimes I'll have dreams in the language. Um, so that's the connection that's there. So I I was a supply teacher in Walpole. You know, I worked at the elementary high school level, and I know, and I've been around Anishinaabe for a while. I know I have lots of friends, and I've heard it a lot. So I was supply teaching one time, and they said, you know, we need a teacher in the immersion program. I was like, oh, okay. So I went there, and I began to be in that immersion program every day for 4 months. And all I could think about is, I remember being in immersion for my own language for about 4 months. Um, so I thought I could, you know, I'll help whatever I know a little bit. So I went in there, and there was no English, and it was, you know, from 9 o'clock in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon, all Ojibwe language. There was no English. And so again, I learned a huge amount. Um, so I was able to actually teach a class to these little kids. Well, they were grade 2, grade 1, grade 2. So I was able to teach a lesson um, in their language to them. So and they were, you know, they heard it every day for, you know, since they were in JK, or maybe at home even. So they were 4 years old, 4, 5, and 6. So they've already had the language for 3 years, and I was able to teach them a lesson in Ojibwe. So it's really good. And I think the other important part of language is, when you learn language, you can't just keep it in here. You need to teach someone else. You need to give it as much as you can to people, because then that actually only reinforces it within you. So to share it, because that's something that was kind of taken from us, was to be able to share it with others. So it's important to share what you've learned, so that you never forget it. I notice that's what helps me to remember things, is if I teach what I've learned, then I don't forget that. um, so one of the other things was, when I first started to learn language as well, it was like all the words and all the languages and phrases and all the things I've learned were stuck like right here. It was all like all memory, all memory. And then I felt like something was um like not right. Like I was thankful for all the words, but they were just words. So I remember praying, you know, like what is it that needs to happen? What has to change? What has to shift? Something has to shift where I can feel that language. So what I realized was, all that language in my head needed to be moved to my heart. And that's what I did. So I envisioned, in prayer, that all those things that I was given that is sitting in my head needs to move to my heart. And I could feel it. It was like, now I'm even more open to learning it. I'm more thankful for it. And it's so it's like the essence of it. You could feel different because of it. You've seen the world different because of it. You treated people different because of it. And you even cared about yourself because you carried it. So it was just, that's the connection. So it doesn't matter what language you learn, but your own language is very important, because that's what the creator gave you. So being in Walpole Island right now, um, and I know how hard it is to work for language, and I know how um, um, discouraging can be. How sometimes, I thought I couldn't do it, and you have to keep on, keep on. and you'll be rewarded at the end for all the work you do, and just to make sure that your language doesn't die. They always have like extinction, but I worked really hard to make sure that my language would never die. Everything I can do, I did everything I could do to make sure that there will always be somebody that knows the language. And once I got to that point, then I left the community and started to work other places, and that's where I came to Wapu Island. um, so I was the grade 8 teacher there for a couple years. And I started, the kids were like, why can't you teach such Ojibwe? And they asked, and I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know enough of it. And start, you doubt your own self. But anyway, I came into that position as the Ojibwe teacher. And so one of the things I wanted those kids to know was that what I'm talking about today is that when you're born, you have that language within you. If you're Anishinaabe, if you're Lenape, that's what the Creator gave you. That's a gift that you have, is your language. And I made sure that the students there, that they know that you're Anishinaabe, therefore you have Anishinaabe language within you already, in your spirit, in your heart. And I taught them about all the things you remember. Where do you put it? Where would you put it? And I asked them just right out, where would you put it? All the things that you've learned. And it was really quiet. And one little girl puts her hand up like that. And I was like, yeah. She's like, right here. And I said, yes. So it took me to be, 30 something years old to realize that. But I want these kids to know that, right, a lot earlier, to help them to be open, because they deserve it. That's what they need for themselves, for their community. It doesn't have to be my community, but we're still related. We're still First Nation territories. Our languages are very closely related. And if there's anything I can do to help a young person to know their identity and their language, then that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I'm doing. So, and the other thing is, because I've learned language uh, through oral transmission, this is how I teach. So the Ontario curriculum today, for native language, they always have reading and writing in there. Reading and writing get higher and higher as the student's age goes up. But for me, I flip it around. So oral comes first, and it's probably about 75 to 80% of what I'm going to do with you as a teacher is to speak to you orally. Because if I don't, you're not going to understand it. You're not going to be able to feel it, or the essence of your language, the spirit of it, if I were to just write it down on the board and say, copy that. So this is how I've learned the best way. We're not immersion. You only get language for 40 minutes, but for those 40 minutes, you are going to consistently hear language, and we're going to go over and over and over it. And you'll be amazed at how quickly these kids can learn. They've learned a prayer, not reading off a paper like I've, had seen people, can you do a prayer? Yep. And they go up there and read off a paper. And that's not learning to me. That's just reading. Like, I can read Ojibwe. That doesn't mean I'm Ojibwe speaker. I could probably read Cree, but that doesn't mean I'm a Cree speaker. So, and I try to teach the kids, the young people, that's your language and it belongs to you. I'm not asking you to read it. I'm asking you to speak from your heart with your language. And if you need help with it, I will help you. I'm right here, but you can do it. You got this. So every day for, the school has been kind of closed off and on, but every morning I taught them a Thanksgiving prayer in Ojibwe, and every day students would take turns and they would be on the PA system saying that prayer without reading it. And I would always tell them, you guys can do it. Remember, it comes from your heart. You're addressing all of creation to start your day, and you're going to help people and offer a prayer on behalf, for that entire school for that day. And you should be really proud of that, because a lot of people can't do that, but you can. So you just, and I try to encourage them as much as they can, because we never got that growing up. We were never encouraged to speak language. So what the things that I don't have, I didn't get when I was younger, I want to give to them. and it doesn't matter what First Nation they're from. I will still do whatever I can do for them. So um, that's probably about all I wanted to share. Just that language is a spirit connection. It's in your heart. It was given to you, and you have to activate it. You have to work hard, because if you are Lenape and Anishinaabe, you're responsible for your language. So your duty is to make sure that you can learn and know your own language as much as you can and pass it on, so that 7 generations down the road there is always an Anishinaabemowin speaker or a Lenape speaker somewhere in your territory. So you've done your part, because that's what the creator gave us, that to carry on, because that's what makes us who we are. So if you want to keep being who you are, then keep speaking your language, stay connected, ask for help. The creator knows, all the struggles and things that happen, prophecies about all of these residential schools and the things that were taken, and we have to start taking back and doing our part with language. So that's all I'm gonna say for now. Anishik for listening.
You watch for your words, Velma. Um, I've I was feeling pretty emotional about your story. I felt
I
like
know.
I learned a lot. I was really, yeah, I was really feeling it. I could tell you were drawing from a really deep place, that
Mhm.
there probably is spirit present. I just
Oh
could
yeah.
feel, I was just feeling really emotional before you were starting to get emotional. I was feeling
Yep.
that
Hmm.
passion for language,
Hmm.
your dedication to your grandchildren, your family. And so I was really feeling that throughout the talk. So hopefully, I'm sure for people that will be viewing this later on, they'll probably feel the same way. Because yeah, I mean, it really comes through with you and your commitment to that. So I'm really appreciating that. But yeah, just for you to tell personal stories about your family, about the vulnerability of going through that, that's really
Yep.
powerful for people that, have doubt, have any fear,
Hmm.
are wondering or starting to look that way about learning language. And so for
Hmm.
you to show everything that you went through, like, even people weren't open and willing to
Yep.
speak to you, or they forgot, you
Hmm.
still stayed committed to that, um to just meet with them, to draw that out of them. And so that's really helpful, I think, to other people that are viewing, that I'm sure they will find themselves in the same kind of scenario, and to not give up,
Yep.
to find that connection, to find that passion. And it's usually in those moments of fear that really good things come of that. So your story is about that perseverance of, you were crying, you were feeling defeated. And
Yep.
for you to do that really shows a lot about your character. And so
Hmm.
that was it was just really inspiring. So Miglash for sharing that. Like I said, I've known you for a long time, but to be able to share that side, that personal side is yeah, I feel like I understand your story a lot more. I know you've always been a speaker and you're teaching, and we see
Hmm.
each other at ceremonies, but those other moments that people don't see, the put together, the happy times, people don't see that. So I think
Hmm.
it's really great for you to show that, to remind that, to encourage our speakers, our elders
Hmm.
that did have the language for a little bit of time, um, that they still have that memory, and to sit with them, to give them time, to encourage them to activate those memories so that we can draw out those teachings. So
Hmm.
that was a really good lesson. So Miigwech to
Hmm.
you for your own dedication, your own work. Like I had no idea, people think you go to Lakehead or you go to some program and all of a sudden, you know, nobody really talks a lot about the number of hours that go into it, the
Yeah.
blood, sweat, and tears that go into it, so that's really great. And this will be a great resource for people. We've been getting a lot of viewers through these pre-recordings. Um, a lot of good feedback. So your story will resonate with other people
Hmm.
that will be viewing this. So miigwech for that. And I'm sure
Mhm.
it'll be a good resource for your grandchildren too, for them to say, hey,
Yeah.
this is my grandma's story. This is what she went through, you know. So
Mhm.
this is really great. And we're really grateful to have you, for you to share with us here through the Indigenous Language Speaker Series.
Mhm.
This is really the whole point of getting this out and encouraging people, motivating people that are teaching, and hearing other
Mhm.
resources and other experiences that people went through. Like, we're
Mhm.
moving forward as Indigenous people, Indigenous nations, trying to pick up our language. And so every
Mhm.
little bit of work that people put in is, we're gonna we're gonna get back to that place again. You know, there will be future generations that aren't speaking English anymore. So, and then
Right.
this is the starting ground. These are you guys have been planting the seeds.
Mhm.
The roots are growing. So it's really encouraging. So miigwech for that. Um, I won't take up too much of your time. Miigwech to everyone that's out there that tuned in. Moving forward, we have Erica Laja on the 30th, and then Jason Parento on July 7th. So both will be on AIAI's Facebook page, the Vimeo link, and the AIAI YouTube page. So there's many viewing options. Please send this out to your resources, your networks, share with people. You can view these videos later on. Use them however you like. We're just trying to provide a resource to the AIA member First Nations or citizens. So we're thinking of you and future generations. So miigwech. Have a good evening, everyone, and tune in next week. Like I said, we'll have Erica Laja from Oneida Nation of the Thames. So miigwech.
Very much.